I'm Sanjana Iyer, Editor-in-Chief of the Boar, and I'm joined here today by Raj Hacker, who is running for Vice President for Education in Warwick's SU Spring 2026 elections. Thank you so much for joining us today, Raj.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So my first question to you is, why did you decide to run for this position?
Well, I've been involved in the student union for about 3 years now, since this first started, and I've always wanted to run for an office position. I mean, that's kind of cheesy, but I have had the idea of running for the role for a while. And education was a position which I was very invested in and interested in kind of seeing where it goes. A lot of the role is very senior and in lots of committees. And when I was the environment ethics officer, I was able to kind of sit on committees and see how they operated. And it was kind of a hard way for me to get into it and understand where my position was. But since then, I feel like I've really kind of come out on my own, kind of understand how the university systems work. And so that when I sit on these committees and also push for my policies that I want to get implemented, I have a better understanding of how to do that. And education officer is the best kind of area where my interests kind of align with the interests of what I want to get done with the role. So I think it'll be a great opportunity if I get it.
That leads me perfectly on to the next question. In terms of what you want to get done, what would your key priorities be if you were elected as Vice President for Education?
Well, I have 4 key priorities. The first is the cost of living crisis. I mean, students are living through a really hard time at the moment, and that's very tied to education. You know, the NUS has a statistic which put out that students are missing meals because of affordability. And that's just terrible. I think that if in order for education to be kept up to a high standard, students need to be well fed, obviously, and not have to charge exorbitant prices for rent and accommodation. So areas such as keeping the rents at a reasonable price, even though at the moment I feel like the rents on campus is far too expensive. Pushing for an end to hidden fees, where students have to pay for textbooks. And also just, that's the cost of living side. Then there's also sustainability. I'm a very big person interested in making things more sustainable. So incorporating climate literacy training into kind of student lives as well. But then there's also the general kind of academic side of things. So I want to increase the self-certs from 2 to 3 to reflect the termly structures. That's kind of helping students be able to still submit their assignments. And then speaking of extensions, mitigating circumstances is not something which is standardized across the university, and it's also very difficult to understand what it is if you're a student who doesn't really know how to kind of operate and use them. So I'd be pushing for support sessions for students to help them understand that. Also for international students, with the rise of racist kind of rhetoric across the UK, I think a lot of students are missing out. International students are at risk of losing a lot of their livelihoods, and they're also come to the country and want to get a job and live in the country afterwards. However, because of how bad the graduate job crisis is, they have to return, and trying to push for extended visas or a reform to the monitoring point system for international students just will make their lives a bit easier and improve their lives, and not have them constantly having to meet the standards that have been set out for them. That is kind of unfair when compared to other other home students. Sorry.
Amazing. And in terms of assessments and exams here at Warwick, what changes do you think are necessary, and how would you work to achieve these?
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest thing is about exam timetables. I think Maniba managed to push for that to be earlier last year, the previous education officer, sorry, before Anania. And I think that for me personally, I think that the extension system is something which can be really improved upon. I'm pretty sure economics don't have self-certs, they're not allowed. And there's also very poor kind of explanations about how, the mitigating circumstances works with different departments and across departments. Also, exams and assessments are never standardized. It's very difficult to kind of have clear understandings of where some assessments go, because, module conveners have different areas. But it's a system which is very messy, especially for joint honor students who have, double the amount of assignments different number of assignments that might all stack up. So you have a bunch of assignments due in 1 week, and I feel like that can be improved better. I remember in the past, students had different assessment types that they could choose onto, and it's different exams they could choose. However, that's been pretty much scrapped across the university. I want to see that kind of brought back to encourage students to have different experiences when it comes to their examinations.
Cool. And so SSLCs are supposed to be the primary forum for academic feedback here. Many students feel that their concerns often don't actually lead to visible change. So how would you ensure that SSLCs actually lead to tangible outcomes rather than just being discussions that people have?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the SLC system needs a big level of reform. I think the engagement is one that's very low. I feel like students, especially in the second and third years, don't necessarily run for SLCs. There's a lot of open positions. There's also the things of committees and faculty reps on the union side of things. The SLCs are supposed to be run by the students' union and organized by the students' union. However, that has kind of been a bit messy there, and there's very minimal interaction between the student union and the SLCs, as well as like chairs of different faculty reps. Different SLCs aren't put on specific committees. So what I'd like to see is a greater level of engagement with SLCs with the Students' Union in terms of how much the SLCs are used and to sit on different committees, as well as chairs of SLCs are invited to the University Senate and encouraged to go, as that's the second highest decision body making entity on campus. And I'd also just like to see this kind of structure be better implemented and better kind of put down. So you have a department issue, you go to your SLC. If you have a issue that needs to be extended beyond that to the faculty, then there you go to a faculty rep. It needs to be beyond that, then it's the education officer, and so on and so forth. So there's far better standardization of all of these systems.
Cool. And my final question for you today is humanities and arts courses across the country are being defunded more than ever, which I'm sure you're well aware of. And Warwick is definitely not immune to this. So having seen lots of staff and Warwick has seen lots of staff cuts in the past year, how would you work to safeguard humanities subjects here at Warwick?
Well, that's a good question. Well, I firstly make sure to stand with staff if and when there is a student staff. If and when there is a staff strike. The staff are incredibly important to this university, and staff job losses are a pretty horrible thing for many, many people. Not only lose their livelihoods, but student use academic experiences that are really vital. I'd make sure that the funding that has been given to STEM departments, while it is impressive, the STEM campus which is being constructed at the moment is not at the cost of the funding for the humanities. You can see the university are forcing to accept far, far more students each and every year. And I would make sure that isn't explicitly leaning towards STEM or business students. I want to make sure that obviously I'm a humanities student. I want to make sure the humanities survive and flourish in the world where people don't really, the government doesn't necessarily see humanities as a viable subject to study at university. So I'd make sure to lobby for that, definitely.
Okay, amazing. Well, that's all my questions. Thank you so much for joining us. This was Raj Hacker, candidate for Vice President for Education in Warwick's SU Spring 2026 elections.
Thank you.